Hi, this is Jamie Mason Cohen, and this is the Leadership Standard, where we explore real life stories from across the business spectrum. It's an intimate discovery of how they shift between triumphs, struggles, failures, disruptions, and future opportunities on a daily basis. We believe that leaders are made and not born. And this podcast reveals, or LinkedIn Live today, how high achievers accelerate to the challenges, win both at work and at home, and lead with confidence while accomplishing their goals, which is why it gives me great pleasure to introduce our guest today. When brands like Google, Starbucks, Shopify, and GE want to decode the future, they call Mitch Joel. So we called him too. Strategy Magazine called him one of North America's leading visionaries. Mitch Joel is co-founder of Thinkers One, a platform that empowers companies with personalized and bite-sized thought leadership from the best thinkers in the world. His first book, 6 Pixels of Separation, named after his successful blog and podcast, is a business bestseller. His second book, Control Alt Delete, was named one of the best business books of 2013 by Amazon. Mitch was also awarded the highly prestigious Top 40 Under 40, is on Dr. Marshall Goldsmith's exclusive 100 Coaches list, and was named a Thinkers 50 Radar Class of 2021. Please join me in welcoming to the Leadership Standard, Mitch Joel. Hey, Mitch.
Hey, Jamie, it just made me realize I have to update my bio. Those are all things that happened almost a decade ago. I had to have achieved something else in the past decade. I'm on your show, so that's great. I'm here with Jake. It's perfect. Yeah, that'll go.
So happy to see you, my friend. And we'll talk about some of those things you've done since.
Sure.
Where I'd love to start is before we jump into some of the topics that we're going to dive into, like AI and leadership and purpose. I want to ask you, most people know you as a speaker, as a podcaster, as a writer, as a thought leader on technology and innovation. What did you do professionally before the work you do today?
No, it's a great question. And I like to joke that all of my work is what afforded me the chance to do all this fun stuff versus now it seems like you can wake up and say, I'd like to be a keynote speaker, and that becomes a profession. When I started speaking professionally, it was based on the work that I was doing. So in a very long-winded way, because it's not a very straight arrow from what happened, but I started writing in the music industry, in particular interviewing rock bands. It was probably in the late 80s. I was still a teenager. And soon after that, became a publisher of music magazines. So I was actually publishing physical magazines in a world pre-internet. And then in the early 90s, my claim to fame is I had a cover story in one of my magazines called The Net. And the big breakthrough in technology at that time was hyperlinks. You could just click a link and go to another webpage. Before that, in the browsers that we were all used to back then, you'd have to type in individual addresses and pages if you wanted to go. There wasn't even websites at that time. So I had this balance happening between media, writing, marketing, advertising, and technology. And from that, I got involved in one of the first search engines, and we developed some of the early models that we now see companies like Google using, pay-per-click and advertising online, things like that. I then hopped over to a mobile content company, which again seems like mobile content. You mean the stuff we got on smartphones? There were no smartphones. I remember at the time, if you were on one mobile carrier and I was on another, we couldn't even text message each other. There was no interoperability for text messaging. So very early into mobile content. I then went back to the music industry for a short while and started a record label, which was a lot of fun. And then the big thing was in the early 2000s, I started a digital marketing agency with 3 business partners. So that's in the early 2000s. And at that time, what I did is I launched this blog and podcast because I had done publishing and known a lot about online media called 6 Pixels of Separation. And that got a lot of attention. You have to remember back in the early 2000s when people like me were saying things like, oh, online advertising is going to be more important than TV advertising. It was heresy. People thought we were insane. The other ad agencies were laughing at us like, okay, sit down, young children. And of course, that prophecy that I wasn't the only one that had, many people had, came to be true. So we're building this digital marketing agency. We've got this blog, we've got this podcast in early days. And that led to a lot of just people wanting me to write, wanting me to speak. And so I did a very large speaking event, which led to a speaker bureau coming forward, Speaker Spotlight, which you and I are both part of. I've been with them 17 plus years. And so we built this agency off of great clients and great work, but also building essentially a media company and building community and connecting to people in ways that others really weren't doing. And we sold that business about 10 years ago to WPP, a large public company. And when we left the business about 5 or 6 years ago, one of the business partners and I came to this office space because we had contracts for the books, the speaking, and all that sort of stuff. And the plan was, yeah, I'll speak, I'll continue creating content and doing media. And in that, we started doing a lot of investing, which we still do, and a lot of advising. And that just led to the idea of Thinkers One, which became the thing that I'm working on while I continue to do all the speaking. But I'm, in a long-winded way, not a fan of speaking about things I haven't done. So I like to make sure that I'm doing a topic or planning to be an expert or a thought leader in something. It can't be something that I've studied. It has to be something that I'm practically doing, whether it's advising, investing, and just getting my hands into it.
Mm-hmm. One of the things you just mentioned in your myriad of successes and this interesting long and winding road of your past is that you co-founded a business and you sold the business. And on this call, there are small to mid-sized business owners from across Canada and the U.S. What are one or two things you learned from running a business and selling it?
Yeah. Running it, I think the greatest point of success that we really had, beyond obviously you have great clients, you're doing great work, I think that that's part and parcel with running a business. It's like saying we sold stuff. Like, great. You're not in business unless you are. But for me, the real miraculous thing is we were 4 business partners. And to this day, we love each other. I mean, we are the closest of friends. We attend each other's kids' weddings and events. We text each other nonstop. We still have what we call partners dinners, where we just go out and hang out with one another. In the marketing agency world, especially post-acquisition, the way you get acquired by these large multinationals, it's very rare and random that partners stick together, let alone 4. And if I think of what I'm most proud of, one is that the people who work for us have gone on and are currently employed and doing or started their own thing, and they're doing incredible things. And nothing gives me more joy than seeing on LinkedIn an update from one of the team members and what they're up to now. But I would say personally, it was the fact that we managed to really be incredible partners to one another and be able to leave it not only unscathed, but really in that type, almost like, it's like a family. It's these guys, a lot of them, all 4 of them, I would say I've known as long as my wife, but close to that. So that's an incredible part. And then, on the business side, it's really about figuring out what your differentiation is. And I know it's a word we toss around a lot, but when I see a lot of other agencies or other tech companies, because I invest in a lot of startups, I typically don't really see their differentiator. They're trying to do so much for so many to try and get that massive valuation that I often wonder if they were more specific to a niche or served a certain type of audience, if the long term, it would only create a better business for them emotionally and just from a health perspective, but give them a more viable path to exit. We had a moment in time where we could have become a general advertising agency. And the truth is, it just so happens with timing and luck that there was a much larger multiple to stay and be a digital agency, which we did. But I also reflect not on the multiple decision, because we didn't really know that then. It was more about staying in our lane and just being great at what we do, even though we probably could have scaled it bigger and larger, and then probably not have realized at the exit that we got a much greater multiple because of how down the one specific path we were.
There's a few points there I want to touch upon. On the last point about differentiation, for a business owner, what are some of the questions you would ask a business owner to reflect on when they're looking at what their true differentiator is in their market?
So I don't think the differentiator needs to necessarily be the product or the service. It could be things like how you market it. It could be things like how you present it. It could be things like, have you added on components to it? So when I think about the agency, at the time it was called Twist Image, and then it became Miro. I think about the fact that we had a media company attached to it, even though it was small, me writing and me blogging and podcasting and speaking and writing books, but just that entity, when we extracted it, and it's called Six Pixels Group now because it's just here. It's just really me and one of my business partners, Aubrey. You realize that actually having the media company was a huge differentiator. The fact that we were charging for thought leadership in a world where most of the agencies were traditionally just giving it away as business development, that was a differentiator. Having the weekly podcast. I mean, now these things aren't. You have to find out what are the things now. But in the early 2000s, they fundamentally were. Me being able to get up on stage and be paid to speak. It could be disruptive if I'm the sole entrepreneur and everybody wants me on the work and I'm busy running around different cities speaking. But in a world where I had 3 other business partners who were really running it, that became an amazing lead generation and business development tool that was a huge differentiator. Think about it from a business development perspective. Here I am knocking door to door and trying to get one company to hear what I'm offering versus I'm on stage sharing how we're thinking about the world, and that's making them line up after I get off on stage to say, how can we work together? So you're now approaching 50 or 60 leads and being paid for it in a world where you're hustling for one. So the differentiator isn't in how it looks or how it sounds or what it is. It could just be in how it's presented to the world.
And how it's presented to the world. The other thing you mentioned was how you get along with your partners, people that you work with. And I remember, because we're friends and I follow you, of course, you posted a picture of, I believe, the co-founders of this company years later in the same place, or you were celebrating, I think, in Montreal. Yeah. And so I vividly remember, even the body language and the look, the energy, as much as you can see in a picture, saying 1,000 words, there really was a bond, like a brotherhood. And so one thing that I hear when I speak with businesses in the tech community is sometimes people talk about those complex relationships with partners. Sure. And how to really optimize those, or if that's not the right word, how to really build those relationships so that they continue to evolve even in the midst of a complex and volatile, changing business landscape. What were some of the things you did to, as a group, either consciously or it might have just happened the way it did, to build those relationships during tough times with your partners so that they continue to grow and they didn't devolve?
I think, if there's a question I can talk about forever, so just raise your hand if you want me to stop, because it's something I think about all the time. I think that the answer is you don't figure it out when there are hard times, you figure it out at the beginning. So I'll give you a couple of things that were very, very true. The joke that I used to tell people is it was really easy because everything that I did, everybody else hated, and everything that they did, I hated. But there's a truism to that. I'm not a good finance person. Aubrey is. I'm not necessarily good at leading the C-level conversations. Mark was. I'm not overly creative or don't know how to apply that creativity to the actual product and the work. That's what Mick did. And so we really had a symbiotic relationship where it couldn't really function if one of our roles weren't there. I'm sure if God forbid something happened to one of us, we'd make it work. But it was really identifying people that are adding at a multiple, meaning, sure, I could do that role, but if I let them just be free and do what they do great, we win. So that would be one. The second one would be that it is very much a democracy, but you're also respecting that person's area of expertise so that it can be somewhat dictatorship. So we might be in a situation where it's a creative call and Mick's opinion would weigh much more heavily than the rest of the 3 of us. But ultimately, if it were very, very serious, you'd want 3 out of the 4 to agree, which again, because we had more partners, it was almost easier because you have more of a flow on that. But the most important part of it, I really think, is what I call the knives out attitude, which is we're always knives out. We have our backs against each other and the knives are out. The challenge that most businesses have is when things go wrong, somebody turns those knives in. Oh, that was your part of your business. You should have done that. Why didn't we do this? We told you, I was outvoted. We had a rule, no knives in. There's no knives in at any point. So we will always hold a strong front with the 4 of us. Those would be the basic things. And then there's just the humanity of it, where it's a business and don't take it personally. It's just, no, it's personal and we all get along. And the question became that if we're all going to put in all of these hours every day and build these teams and build a multi-office business and try to scale and scale, that we have to take it personally. And if we're not taking it personally, that's when we should call on each other and say, hey, how can I best support you? And, years later, I would listen to Brene Brown talk about her relationship with her husband and this idea of like, I'm at 30, you're at 90, I'm going to need you to carry some extra weight for me. Without knowing it, we were doing a lot of that. So if I had a medical thing or somebody else had to be away, we were very quick to make it invisible to anybody else. We were there to cover each other and support each other. And then lastly, the real thing, I keep saying lastly because I have a million more, but the last one I'll give you now is we put an amazing management team in place for every aspect of the business. And we really acted as mentors and guides instead of tyrants and dictators in the business. We allowed the management team to run their business and hired people that wanted mentorship or wanted to have that inter collaboration that we always talk about. And we had that from very, very early days. So it became part of the culture.
Okay. I'd love to switch gears now and talk about AI, an area that you talk about regularly to some of the leading companies in the world. I saw recently, a year ago, you spoke at a forum for Dell Technologies where you were in a fireside chat. And that particular conversation went into real specifics about the benefits and some of the challenges of AI. I want to get into that, but just as a broad starting point, what do you think a business owner in Canada should know about AI moving forward into 2024?
The most important aspect of it, which is it's very meta and it's almost hard to wrap our head around, is if you mistaken this for another type of technology that has been disruptive, so you go from cow plows to having engines, the steam engine, you go from the printing press to pre-printing press, you go from I think all of those are things that we will typically look at and go, you see, humans are very good at adapting to technology and creating value beyond that. And I think that will be true with AI. And the and is we have this question of intelligence and redundancy. So I'll talk about redundancy because it answers the intelligence question, which is, Jamie, you're a really smart guy. You did really well in school. You pushed yourself to this level and you're in this place in life. Now, if you're a manager or running a company and you look at your day and you go, I have an advanced degree, I'm really good at what I do, but most of the tasks that I do day in and day out mentally are quite repetitive. That's the thing that AI likes the most to destroy. And I think that creates the bigger challenge for everybody to think about is any act that is redundant, whether it's an act that's physical work or knowledge work, especially now with AI, it's knowledge-based work. That's the thing that AI can eat up the fastest and do it much better and much quicker, much more efficiently. So that's like a general fear that I have. The fear, it can lead down a dark road or it can lead down a positive road. The positive road is we're great at technology, we'll adapt, we will create more value. Every technology has always created more value as it's come along. The fear is that what happens in the in-between years. So if you think about people like Yuval Noah Harari, who wrote Sapiens and Homo Deus, who I think is a brilliant thinker, this is his main concern with it. It's not that we're not going to get through it. It's what happens in the 4 to 8 years of this disruption if we truly have something that is this incredibly good at creating that type of value. So if you look to places, Germany would be a great example, pre-World War II, Hitler, they had a 25% unemployment rate. That is a festering ground for extremism. So if we're in a place where AI can disrupt things that fast and actually puts employment at a very low level, especially if you think about the poly crisis we're going through now, what we're seeing in the world now, which is scary enough, I think it's enough to at least have our hand on the break glass here with the hammer. We don't have to break the glass yet, but as leaders, we have to be thinking what is going to happen. And just by my own use of it, I see how it is changing a lot. And that's just with generative AI tools. I'm not talking even about true AI. right? The ability for you to tell an algorithm something and it to do it and build it and then explain to you how it did it without any human intervention. We're getting there in some instances. We're not there fully, but when we are there close to fully, that's when you might want to break the glass just a little bit and to see what happens.
For someone entering the workforce, or for older workers who are a little concerned that their job might be replaced by AI, what will AI not be able to replicate at work?
So this is the question that I don't know we have the immediate answer to. What we're really seeing in the generative AI phase right now is it impacting the knowledge worker, which is new. We're used to it at an automation level. I think the question we have to think about is if we're looking at the advances in automation that we're seeing, everything from the Tesla robots and on, that if that gets integrated into these AI tools, then we're talking about all the stuff that can't be disrupted right now. So things like right now, it's really hard to disrupt needing a good plumber or an electrician or a painter or a surgeon. But you can start seeing how some of those actions can be removed, allowing that person to maybe focus just on the handiness of it. That's problematic in itself because you're forcing yourself into a state where it's a bit more redundant than we'd like it to be. It's that integration of the two that I think is the more concerning place right now.
And this is obviously a bigger question, but how can companies experiment or start to experiment with the benefits of generative AI while maintaining the trust of their customers, employees, and the community or their industry at large?
Yeah, it's a big and it's a deep question only because what we're learning now, obviously, is a lot of the materials that this stuff is trained on doesn't have permission to use. Then you have to worry, where is this answer coming from? We have to worry about things like, is it producing things that are accurate, that are going to truly help me and benefit me? So I believe right now we have to see it more as a co-pilot. And when I think of it as a co-pilot, I tend to remove my thinking around things like, is it telling me the truth? I'm not asking it questions to get to a truth. I'm using it to get either confirmation of some ideas or help me ideate better. That's typically how I think about it in a very primary way. I can push that. So an example might be that I would take something I've written, an article, and I will put it into a text-based generative AI tool, ChatGPT, Claude, whatever it might be, and I'd say to it, make this 550 words, but write this in 5 different types of writing styles. So I'm not having it write for me. I already did the work, but now I'm getting to see it from a different perspective. Maybe it'll write one in a more persuasive way. Maybe it'll write one in a more comical way. Maybe it'll write one that's more formal or academic. I can then see that as a writer and think there's some really interesting thoughts in here. Or I can put it into the engine and say to it, give me 6 reasons why everything I wrote might be wrong, which I love to do. I'm almost creating the red shirt tee for my work. So I do a lot of radio interviews. So that's what I would do. If I'm asked to comment on an article, I'll put my thoughts down in writing and then I'll put it into the engine and say, give me 5 opposing perspectives on this, because then I know potentially where the areas of attack might be or the skepticism might be. I might use it to help me tweak headlines or stories that I'm writing. I use it for audio for my podcast. I will dump it in. It'll transcribe it into text. Because of their generative AI tools, I can edit the text. Not only that, I've preloaded it with an hour of me speaking, and I can highlight words and tell it to overdub it and just type in the word and it'll say it in my voice. And it's very, very accurate and does it very, very well. I use it in those ways, which make me better. Maybe not time-wise more efficient, not there yet for that, but it's very easy to roll that back. If you don't have anybody who's writing your email marketing to say to it, this is my industry, this is the type of voice I like, this is the type of email I want to send, give me 5 different campaigns with 5 different topics, and then ask it to work from there. Yeah, it gives you a pretty good answer. I just think you have to be very careful of what that answer is. And ultimately, if the voice is too generic, as you know, it doesn't really work anyways. That being said, you can tell it things like, I want you to use the best search engine optimizations strategies that I want you to write it specifically so that it gets past email filters, whatever it might be. And it is quite good at doing those things, I have to say. So when you're a junior or you're older and you're thinking about what this might do to impact it, the only rational answer is to get ahead of it and don't be a victim of it. The beauty of it is that these tools are really easy to use. I mean, if you're already using these tools, you're already using those tools. And the only way is to get ahead of it, because I don't know how long the window is until we don't need that human on top of it yet.
One of the things you mentioned in that little piece was how you use it. And well, that was a big part of it. And what I heard was you use it for business, but you also use it for creativity and coming up with ideas, looking at a topic from multiple perspectives. One thing I've heard from business owners and leaders, and I'm sure you have as well, is there's a desire by experts in different fields to write a book. And they might not have started, or they're in the process. I met one of these leaders recently in Winnipeg, and she was talking about her vision, a successful business owner, a successful chair in the tech community. And we had this discussion about what her vision was. What are some of the ways that you touched upon it? I wonder if you could tell me a little more. If someone in the audience right now wanted to write that book, how could a AI tool help them start that process in 2024 so they finally finish that published draft of their business book that they've been hoping to get done for years?
Yeah, I don't know that there's a straight answer to this. The purist in me thinks that you should probably sit down and really think about, do you want to write a book? If you're so struggling with the effort, I don't know that I'd be the person who would just use ChatGPT and figure it out. It's so easy. Like, I don't love that strategy. What I do love is things like feeding it 5 or 6 concepts and telling it to come up with a table of contents for you for a 25,000 word book over 8 chapters. How would you break that down? Would I copy and paste that and use it? Never in a million years, but I would start there. I might take each chapter that it gives me, write my own 500 words for it, and then say to it again, can you write this in 5 different writing styles, or write it more like this person, or add 1,500 words to that and see what comes out. I think there's so many ways that you could, in theory, not in theory, in practice, we're seeing this every day. People are producing books like this without much human intervention every single day. I think we all know that the quality of those books is questionable at best. So how high is your bar? And I don't just mean that about writing a book, but I mean that about everything you post on X and everything you post on LinkedIn, and every article you write and every podcast you create. Is how high is your bar? If your bar is nowhere because you're doing nothing, you're just like, something's better than nothing, I'd argue maybe not. I don't necessarily agree with that. Just creating more stuff in a world where we have unlimited stuff isn't helping the problem. I believe the real great use of it is when you've created some type of mastery in some arena. So I would step back from that question, Jamie, and I would ask myself, if I were not someone like I am creating so much content, and say, look, you have text, you have images, you have video, you have audio. You can do anything. You can create short form content. You can create long form content. We're recording this to release as a podcast, but we're also streaming it live. So you've recorded, you have live. Where could I add some value? What am I passionate about? And some people might say, I like creating short bursts and getting involved in conversations. X might be the place for you, formerly Twitter. I know that for me, it's 2 things. It's mostly text-based, which is writing. And I know I like to write long-form articles, 500 words plus. I know that I like audio much more than I like video, so I don't do a lot of video. So I take time having conversations with smart people like yourself on my show and talking and having real conversations and back and forth. I do a lot of radio, so I do audio in that sense. That's what satiates me. So every week, I can come up with 3 or 4 things, an article, a list of things, a podcast, and I'm good to go. If you look at it from that spectrum and you're creating things of value, even if you're posting them on other channels like a LinkedIn or Medium or Substack or whatever it might be, then you can start using the tool just to help along the way. So I'll give you a great example of help that's not text-based. If you want images for a post or an article, it's typically stock photography. You can buy it, you can get it free, but it's still stock photography. If you type in the word great business connection, you're going to see two hands shaking. Like that's going to be the picture. And usually it's going to be, people of different diversity, because it's like very standard. Like I could almost tell you what the search result will push back. But having tools like DALL-E, which is owned by OpenAI, which is ChatGPT, or Midjourney and others, you can go in and say, this article is about this, 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 and this. I want it to look like a 1940s pulp. I want it to look like a futuristic sci-fi. I want it to have it. And you can actually have it output stuff that I could never personally do. And if I went on Fiverr and asked somebody to do it, it probably wouldn't give me this many options that I could change on the fly. So again, that bar is a lot lower for me because now I'm competing with crappy stock photography. So those are the things that I'm also thinking about when I'm doing it. But I would say that when people say it's not creative, I'd argue it can be very creative. I have one chat in particular that's driven by a lot of my content that I've created and a lot of ways in which I've been training it over, now it's about a year. And the results it'll give me for things like titles is very shockingly good, like stuff I would have never thought of. And it makes me really understand that it can be much more creative than I am, especially in things that I'm very limited in. But it's the bar that you're setting and the choice you're making first.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to just pause for a moment. And those of you who are watching this on LinkedIn Live, if you have questions, even though there's a little bit of lag in time, in the time we have left, I would encourage you to ask Mitch, our technology and innovation expert, one of the leading in the world. If you have any, we are going to get to them to the best of our ability by the end of our show. Mitch, you've had a podcast amongst your other pieces or other things that you do, and you are unique from what I've seen. I'm a follower of your podcast. It's an excellent podcast. You've done this for 20 years almost, give or take, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it's
and
close.
You have not missed filming or recording, we should say, an episode in those 20 years with some of the leading thinkers in the world. What is the secret? And if you don't like that word, if it's too hokey, what is the discipline behind being able to shoot or record a show every week for the last 20 years?
Yeah, it's crazy when I look at the dates and time and to watch the iteration of it too. The fact that people do them in seasons now, so that there's 6 episodes a season and release them over the year, and I'm doing 52 every single year, and I've done that consistently since it started. I think it's about 17 or 18 years ago. In fact, I have another podcast where I interview bass players, just my little pinky toe back in the music business. And I keep calling it my new podcast. That one's been going, that's a monthly show, but it's been going for 9 years. And I'm like, I can't believe it's 9 years. So one is, time is a mystery to me. The fact that it's been that long, I can't even wrap my own head around it. Why I do it is very simple, because I can't not do it. That's the answer. That I figured this thing out where I can call up authors of books that I love or smart people that I meet on the road speaking and spend an hour with them and pick their brain and then help them in some little way promote the work that they're doing. But really, it's the most selfish act I do every single week, which is the fact that I get to pin people like you against the wall and have you to myself for an hour, and not just have you give me your keynote and your sound bites, but have a real intellectual conversation that I hope is more like a sparring session than a Q&A and a back and forth. So a real form of conversation where, my general sentiment to people is, I want you to show your work, and you're showing it not to a journalist, although I have a journalist background, but someone who is very much a peer, a student of this, because I wouldn't ask you on this show if I didn't feel that I had a certain, skill level in that topic. It's very rare when I just invite someone on because I'm interested in a topic that I know nothing about, but I do that. And once you go down the road, I'm in a place right now where we're streaming this in mid-January almost. If I don't do another interview or conversation with someone, I'm good until well past the half year. I think I've got 19 or 20 of them just sitting, waiting to edit and put out. So that's the other part, is I get ahead of it, but I'm only getting ahead of it because there's just so many great books or stories being told that every day when I look at my inbox, I'm thinking, oh, I should speak to you about that, or that person about that. I should speak to her about this. And it just goes like that. So I sometimes feel bad that I'm often publishing a conversation that took place 6 or 7 months ago. Thank God for editing. But that's what it is. I can't imagine myself not doing it, but I feel like if the internet shut down tomorrow and people would still endure spending an hour with me, I'd still do it, even if there was no audience. That's how I am.
And your podcast is presented by Thinkers One.
Yeah.
And Thinkers One is your new business, which in full transparency, I'm honored to be a part of. Can you share with us what Thinkers One is, why you started it, what problem does it solve for businesses across the country and beyond?
Yeah, happy to. And it's great that you're a part of it, and I hope it's fruitful for you. It was an idea that Aubrey and I came up with during the pandemic, but not as a result of the pandemic. What I was seeing with a lot of my speaking peers is they were building out courses and online communities, and you should do this. And I was getting approached and pitched to do all these things. And I thought, candidly to myself, that I don't want to do things that require more and more of my time. I want to do things that I can reach more and more people that will impact my core at the time, which was essentially do a lot of keynote speaking and radio and media appearances that opens up the door to having better and better investment opportunities. That was the real engine. At the same time, Aubrey and I very much were interested in this idea of everything that happened with Shopify. Very fortunate and great timing. I've known Harley Finkelstein since before he was a part of Shopify, and he was just a merchant of theirs, and stayed friends and mentorship and just being around each other and helping one another and seeing that business flourish. We realized there's something we'd like to spend time with there as well. And so the idea for Thinkers One was really looking at this pandemic and saying, wow, we have in-person work, we have remote work, we have hybrid work. We have a lot of challenging issues facing business leaders today. There's a lot of pressure downwards on budgets and what they can do and how they can travel and when they can travel and when they can't travel. And videos made it so much easier for people that perhaps there might be a way to offer people like you and myself and many other thought leaders, speakers, authors, thinkers, journalists, captains of industry to be a part of their everyday meetings. So the other challenge we had is often as a leader, I'd send off emails to the team like, this is a great TED Talk and you should all watch this and file it. But if we were all in a meeting and we were talking about how do we lead and how do we push new ideas forward, and I said, before we leave, I'm really happy to have Jamie recorded a video for us. He's going to talk for us about 15 minutes on these 3 issues that are impacting us. Or we have him here live, just Q&A. Let's just do an AMA with him. Let's go. That's a great way to add value. It's a great way that satiates whether you're in person, remote, or hybrid. It works in all. And the idea, the hardest part was making this relevant to a thought leader like you. And so Thinkers One is a really unique thing in that you can basically buy recorded or live videos from a bunch of different thought leaders. They last for approximately 15 minutes of these video experiences. And we recommend them for things like lunch and learns for clients, your regular, you do your weekly meeting with the whole team. You want to add some people are turning off on Zoom. They're getting bored of these meetings. How do you add energy and excitement? And you're actually helping them get better at a direct challenge that you're dealing with without having it be more on their time. So now you're not saying, go and do this for a half hour, go attend this seminar, go watch this webinar. You're saying, hey, we're in this meeting anyways for 45 minutes. I'm going to give 15 minutes of this time to someone else who's going to give us a different perspective. And again, because of the technology and the world that we live in, it's able to do it. So it's great. You can go in, choose your thought leader, fill out a form so that it's personalized and customized for you, whether it's live or recorded. They get the order, you pay for it on your credit card. And if it's a video that you're recording for them, within 5 business days, you'll have it, or you're going to give them a handful of dates and that'll be confirmed back to you which day works for you to pop into their Zoom or their Teams meeting or whatever. And that's the beginning of it. Right now we have close to 100 thinkers, and we have really great names. People like Rita McGrath and Whitney Johnson and Tom Peters and Dory Clark and Jamie Cohn, and the list goes on and on. And it's an experiment. It's a new startup. It might not work, but we've been having a lot of fun with it.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'd love to just jump into a speed round. And the
Okay.
speed round will be just quick sound bites. If you want to expand to tell us more, that's fine as well. The first question is, what's a book you're reading now?
Oh, that's a good one. What am I reading right now? I've been recommending Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell to quite a few people. Right now, I am reading, I think is it called Geek Culture? Can I pull up my phone and tell you exactly what the book is? Because I don't want to get the
Yes.
name wrong. Okay,
Yes.
my Kindle's right here. Don't panic, everyone. It's
We're live, so this is
doing it.
improvised.
Doing this. It's perfect. We're
Perfect.
here.
Yeah.
I am currently reading, one is Extremely Online by Taylor Lorenz that I'm enjoying quite a bit. Really loving that. I'm also in the middle of reading Outrage Machine. Again, all about what the internet is doing to us. Really, really enjoying that one. And the third one that I'm currently reading is The War of the West by Douglas Murray, which is a free speech proponent. Very interesting perspective. And that's been really opening my eyes. But I really, as you're experiencing, I read so much, it's hard for me to sometimes remember what's currently there, but I'm glad my phone was right here. So
yeah, I find Douglas Murray inspirational in his ability to articulate.
Articulation and knowledge combined are very dangerous. Again, his perspective may not be your cup of tea. I love people who are extremely good at communicating an idea.
Yeah.
That's why I have such an appreciation for authors and writers who do it and do it well. And that's why I push away the idea of letting GPT automate it.
Clarity and depth of knowledge in his case. I'm going to weave this in, and I'm thrilled. James Frail, who is one of the extraordinary chairs in the tech community I've had the pleasure of working with too, he asked a question for Mitch, which is, what should tech chairs and members who are small to mid-sized business owners, those are also key executives, emerging leaders within this community around the country, what should they be doing, Mitch, to monitor AI-driven changes in their industries?
That's a great question. Right now, because we are a bit in the hype cycle, I subscribe to a lot of newsletters, and I would make the argument that some of them are more hype than real opportunity. Because of that, I do think there are some trusted sources. MIT Technology would be one of them. Wired would be another. Fast Company is doing a good job covering it. There's been some excellent coverage in places like Harvard Business Review. I would also recommend following the Lex Friedman podcast, because this one will go to extremes. They'll have people who think AI is the future and everybody should love it. Then they have people who think AI is going to kill us and destroy everybody. So you have to approach Lex Friedman not from the perspective of he's an excellent editor and giving you a perspective, but he will give you often a perspective that he himself doesn't believe in. He gives them the platform. But and his shows can be 2 to 3 to 4 hours long. So anything Lex does on AI, I recommend watching, but really do a deep background check on that person's values, what they're trying to say. Yeah, that can be the problem sometimes.
Excellent. And let's do one more. Who's a mentor from your past whose influence continues to show itself in one form or another in your life today in what you're doing?
Yeah, without a doubt, I was actually just texting them the other day. It would be Tony Blauer, who most of you won't know. Tony Blauer is one of the leading close quarter combative instructors in the world. So basically, he trains Navy SEALs, Air Marshals, cops, military, and just general individuals about the real things that happen in a physical confrontation. I happened to meet him when I was much younger, 12, 13 years old, and I was into martial arts, traditional martial arts. And he was a real irreverent person, bringing forward this idea of street fight is not martial arts. When the early days of UFC came out, he was training some of the fighters because of how he really understood what happens in a physical conversation. But Tony always said that 90% of a fight is psychological, not physical. And the work that I did training with him and then becoming one of his coaches over the years and actually helping him coach a lot of these people just sticks with me every day, because it's so much about the things we talked about: psychology, communication. And ultimately, if you can handle yourself in a situation that is that highly volatile and that tense and crazy, it gives you a certain level of comfort in other areas of your life. And often when I'm coming across great business books or thinkers, they'll say something or do something and I'll realize that Tony was talking about that in a martial arts, boxing ring 20, 30 years ago. And so to this day, I often reflect on the work, not only that he did in training me, but allowing me to coach people and hearing their challenges and what makes them anxious and what gets them into a fight. And then ultimately, the reality of it is Tony used to say, the minute you get in spar with someone, the first time they get punched in the face, you can see they read their entire life. And I used to laugh when he would say that, but then as I got more and more advanced, you could really see like who a person really is when they're in an extreme situation. So that's why people like Survivor and shows like that, by the way.
The way you do anything is the way you do everything.
Totally, yeah.
And the question that I have for you as we wrap up is, this is a show where we believe that leaders are made and not born. We have business leaders as a primary audience for this show. Mitch, you work with leaders from across the business spectrum at different levels. What does it mean to you to be a leader today?
Yeah, I mean, I'd even question that. I think some of the best leaders are actually born with it. I think often that, the example I use is the bass play. So when I interview these amazing bassists, they'll say to me, "Oh, do you play bass?" And while I studied it at a post-secondary level, I don't anymore. I don't play. And so my line is, I know how to play the bass, but I'm not a bass player. I think you can learn tenets of what makes great leadership, but the truly great leaders have something very natural and innate in them. And Jamie, you and I have seen this countless times when people get up on stage to speak. There are some people that have this extra thing that they're born with. You see this in musicians, athletes, online. So you can train and get better and get really competent at it. But there's some people who know how to write, and then there are writers. So when I think about, what it means to be a leader, I look at that balance between nature and nurture. I'm always looking to see what is that real balance and what does that look like. And I think I could use a ton of verbs we'd all talk about, or adjectives around someone who is able to understand empathy, and someone who's got a great emotional intelligence, and someone who has a vision, and all of those things. But I do think that we're in a time, not to bum us all out as we leave here, but I do think that we're in a time where there are so many macro factors that are impacting our everyday that even the best of leaders, I think, are really going to be challenged as this water seems much more volatile than it's ever been. So with that, what does it mean to lead? It means that you have more than confidence, but you have a knowledge and experience and an ability to coach people through those extreme moments, make them feel comfortable, make them feel connected, make them feel like a team, ultimately making people feel like they are achieving and excelling. And I do think there's a little twist on that where you are helping them see a level of excellence that they themselves did not see in themselves. Mm-hmm. And when you can do that, I think that's what a true leader really does.
It reminds me of leaders help people believe in themselves even before they believe.
Exactly.
It's creating that environment for them.
You just said it better than I did, because you're a great leadership speaker and I'm not, and that's why.
Mitch, how do we reach you to find out about Thinkers One, about your podcast? I think I know the answer to this because I've heard you answer this before. Yeah. And all the extraordinary things that you're working on that, like me, I continue to learn from you.
I appreciate that. My standard answer would be just Google Mitch Joel. Now you go to thinkersone.com, you can go to sixpixels.com, you can go to mitchjoel.com. All of those will redirect you to the area that's of interest to you. I hope this was of value. I so appreciate your time, Jamie, and I'm a huge fan of your work. I've done stuff for the tech group before, so always excited to speak to people who are trying to figure out technology and what's next. And yeah, please, find me, especially LinkedIn's a great place too. I'm happy to connect with everybody and touch base for sure.
And I genuinely mean this. I've had the pleasure of watching you speak live in front of, I think it was downtown Toronto, in front of a large finance audience. It was at least 500 to 800 people. And you had that crowd. People were on the edge of their seats for the entire keynote, as I was, as a fan in that instance. And so if you have a company or a retreat, or you are looking for really, really the best in the world speaking on technology and innovation, Mitch Joel is your guy. Mitch, today we touched on a lot of different areas, but including what got you to this place in starting your own business, the value of really building relationships with your partner, differentiators, AI on multiple levels, both from a business perspective and also in terms of creativity. We talked about your podcast and how some of the ways that you have kept it going for so long and what your secret behind that is. Thinkers One, your new business, nature versus nurture, and what makes a leader. And I just want to thank you so much for your time today.
I appreciate it. I'll spend an hour with you anytime. You just ask.
So thank you so much. This was the Leadership Standard, and we encourage you to hear more from Mitch and some of the leading thinkers in the world. Subscribe, and we'll see you next time.